I'm Butch Stearns here on day one of the HealthIT Insights Summit. Alongside is Gary Barnett, our opening keynote this morning from the Bathwick Group. Gary, how are you?
I'm well, loving Boston.
Now, well, you've been here before.
Yes,
you spent considerable time in Boston.
Yeah, no, and the only thing is I had forgotten how cold it gets in
Well, it was
March.
just 80 degrees the other day, and now it's 20.
Yeah, but that's a lie you New Englanders always tell. It was always 80 degrees the week before.
We're halfway through day one here. You were the opening keynote, and as knowledgeable and as passionate as you are about the healthcare industry, I would imagine, this is just my guess, that even with just a half a day under our belts here, that you come into these events and you learn as much as you pass on, no?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. There's no replacement for talking to real people who have the real problems. One of the constant dangers you have, if you're spending time analysing an industry or watching an industry, is ivory tower syndrome is a real danger. You can go out into the desert for 40 days and 40 nights and live off locusts and honey, but if what you're doing and what you're thinking about doesn't actually bear a relation to what real people are struggling with, it doesn't matter how bright you are, it's still a waste. So there are, being constantly reminded of the reality of the real practitioners' issues is hugely important.
So in your time here this morning, what's one thing that maybe surprised you, or one thing that you've taken away already in that vein?
Well, the one thing that's been confirmed is that people are still struggling with heterogeneity. One thing that has surprised me, I suppose, is the readiness of people to recognise the challenges and to try and start the process. So we're not at the point, in fact we're way beyond the point of trying to persuade people that really good metadata management is a good idea. They know that. So the next step is to help them start the journey. So maybe there are a number of areas, I think, where we've moved on. We don't have to sell the idea anymore. What we have to do is help people actually take those first steps.
One of the things that's been reinforced to me about you, and quite honestly, and why I find you refreshing, is that you make no bones about it. You come up there and say, look, we're not going to solve the world's problems today. A part of the first step is accepting that fact. And once you accept that fact, then the word solution really starts to mean something.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, for goodness sakes, we have talked about infrastructure renewal. We've talked about data today. We've talked about metadata. Just take the metadata panel we've just had. Really interesting topic. Half an hour. You could spend 6 months talking about that topic. We're not, there is no magic wand. But if we can help people understand where they are, and it's the classic. It's a classic problem. If you want to get to A, you need to know where you're starting from.
Right. If you're going to get to Z, you can't go straight from A to Z. Is the point, right?
I mean, when I was a kid, I lived in the country, and when people would stop and ask directions, our default response was, well, if you want to go there, I wouldn't start from here.
Good answer. Let me ask you about some of the differences in healthcare. There's so many in England and in the United States. Obviously, it's a national healthcare system in England, but when it comes to all the issues we're talking about here, what are some of the differences, some of the different challenges that healthcare IT professionals face in England with a streamlined or somewhat streamlined process compared to the United States?
Well, the big advantage of having a single healthcare system is that we, in the UK, we don't have anything like the scale of integration challenge that you have in the States. So there are well over 1,000 different actors. In fact, there are many thousands of different actors at play in the US, from specialist providers, specialist labs, doctors, insurance companies, payers, hospital groups,
patients,
and absolutely. So to one extent, we have less of a problem in that regard. In that, by and large, there is one payer. That isn't to say, in fact, we have a pretty fast-growing private health insurance market in the UK as well, but they are keying into an already very established system. So, in some respects, we're lucky. And I think in other respects, because it tends to be a more monolithic system, the scope for real innovation in service delivery is probably a little less. We have to work a little bit harder, with more rigid walls. It gets harder to.
Right. Is there less of a need? Is there more of a need here? Are there more challenges here, or just different challenges?
I think undoubtedly the challenge of integration is much greater here,
yes.
Because there are so many more actors.
Well, there's different languages, basically.
Well, no, absolutely, and indeed, there really are.
Well, literally and figuratively, yes.
There's no getting around it. The one very big challenge that the United States has is you pay more than twice what everyone else pays for healthcare that is, broadly speaking, the same. You can argue the statistics, and there are undoubtedly some areas where U.S. healthcare is way ahead.
Well, we're here in New England, which is viewed as the healthcare capital of the world. We always love to say the best doctors in the world live here in Boston.
Yeah, absolutely. But there is that delta. If you look at the G10 nations, if you graph a whole range of statistics, whether it's survival rates from cancer, survival rates from trauma, infant mortality, life expectancy, all the G10 nations are, give or take, pretty much the same. The only graph that's startling is the cost per capita. Mm-hmm. And the cost per capita goes... Mm-hmm. And that's a serious challenge. And I'm not proposing for a second that I know how you're going to solve that. And it's certainly not going to be something you solve just by passing a bill. But that is a looming challenge, because this is a percentage of your GDP.
Yes. Yes. So there are so many different things we could talk about, but let's finish up with this. So if I'm a healthcare IT professional and I'm dealing with all the things you just talked about, data, infrastructure, and all of that, where is B? To get to Z, where do I begin? Where do I begin with the data? Do I begin to rationalize and understand what type of data I have, how it's being stored, where it's going? Is that where you start? Is that what B is?
I think there's a strong case, in fact, for starting all of them simultaneously. So, you have an infrastructure challenge, you have a data challenge, yes. You have a process challenge. I'm going to come over a little bit nerdy and say my instinct is to start with the infrastructure, but that's probably because my career began in the data center, if I'm honest with you. But
most IT people would agree with you.
Well, my sense is that infrastructure, whether it's the network that you use to join these things up, it's the server hardware you use to run the applications on, it's the storage infrastructure you use to store the bits and bytes, yes. that eventually become data when they're used. If that's rubbish, then it's very hard to build up the other stuff. So that's I suppose my instinct, but there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to say, here is a process project, here is a data project, here is an infrastructure project, and start doing all three.
I tend to agree with you on the infrastructure. I'll use a car analogy. I mean, you can have the greatest tires in the world, but if your car is out of line, those tires are going to be gone very quickly. I lied. One final question. I've found myself in a lot of conversations with IT professionals over the last year in a lot of different industries, and one of the common challenges or pain points I hear from them is that in this open, social, and mobile world, there is the demand, the need for all kinds of people within your own organization, no matter what industry you're in, to have access to data, to have the ability to share that data and pass it on. Now you look at the healthcare industry specifically. So while all IT professionals face that challenge, well, wait a minute, you can't just have access to data, yet they know they need to make it. How is it different in healthcare, those challenges?
Well, you kind of identified them. The advantage is people are much more sensitive.
Yes.
When you talk about your personal medical record, you can immediately associate that with a set of data, mm-hmm. and people tend to be fairly binary on how comfy they are about that sort of stuff being shared. Yeah. What is interesting, I think, is outside the healthcare industry, I think people are only just beginning to discover that they'd like to have a little bit more privacy. So, I mean, we have this scandal at the moment where organizations are starting to ask people for their Facebook passwords at interviews because they want to dig around Facebook. So, if anything, I believe that there'll be a growing number of people who say, wait a sec, this social data, it is mine. I do want to control it. So open social, emerging technologies like open social, the Diaspora Project, which is an attempt to create an alternative to Facebook where you own your data and you control who sees and who uses your data. So I think actually in that one domain, at least we're sensitized to our personal medical records. We're still, there's a generation of kids who have to learn that they need to be nearly as sensitive about their spring break photographs as they are about their personal
and of course, when you talk about healthcare, that's one of the things that, while it's not unique, it sort of differentiates the healthcare industry because it is personal. You're talking about people, and that data is about people, and it's about you. And at one time or another, everybody's a patient.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the one other domain that is similar is your financial records.
Yes.
And in some respects, we've wrestled in part with that as we try and transfer details of our portfolio from one broker to another and so on. So people are also very sensitive about your financial and medical records are the two ones that people tend to be the most genuinely aware and concerned about.
Well, Gary, speaking for everybody at the Pulse, we thank you for being a part of our event this year. You've been a great addition. And you should be a little bit more passionate about what you talk about.
Oh, well, you know me. Show me a bushel, I'll hide my light under it. Thanks very much, man.
Thanks, Gary.
Cheers.
He's Gary Barnett of the Bathwick Group. This is Health IT Insight Summit at the Harvard Club here in Boston. I'm Butch Stearns of the Pulse Network.